Hello everyone and good evening. My name is Don Arlith and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw here on TVP World. Top officials from Taiwan visited Warsaw today to attend the Poland-Taiwan Economic Cooperation Forum. The two countries could develop significant economic relationship, which begs the question, how much is too close for Beijing? We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first up, let's take a look at the headlines. The Swedish government will finance the production of Ukrainian long-range drones. Prime Minister Viktor Orban invites Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu to visit Hungary despite the International Criminal Court's warrant. And Krzysztof Penderecki's version of The Black Mask premieres tonight at the Polish National Opera in Warsaw. Business ties between Poland and Taiwan are growing stronger as companies in Taipei look to expand their operations into Central and Eastern Europe. The Polish-Taiwanese Economic Cooperation Forum, held in Warsaw on Friday, saw the announcement of the upcoming first direct air service between Warsaw and Taipei. Our reporter Paweł Trzaskowski has more.
Taiwan is already very visible in the region when it comes to business, most notably in Lithuania and Germany, and is now looking to expand in Poland. Taiwan is responsible for 60% of semiconductor production around the world, so there are hopes that the country might become the next South Korea or Japan that will invest heavily in our region. I actually spoke on the matter with Andrzej Dycha, the president of the Polish Investment Trade Agency. Here's what he told me.
I believe that Taiwan, as that was previously with the case in case of Japan and South Korea, will become an important element of the business investment landscape of Poland.
This exchange is expected to be strengthened by direct flights between Warsaw and Taipei, announced at the conference. The new connection will be a result of a partnership between LOT Polish Airlines and Taiwan's EVA Air.
I'm happy to announce that Taiwan's EVA Air will soon offer indirect flight services between Taiwan and Poland. So this will further strengthen people-to-people and the commercial ties between our two countries.
Poland is now Taiwan's seventh biggest partner in Europe, importing LCD panels, semiconductors and electronic parts. Taiwan is also Poland's seventh biggest trade partner in Asia, with main export products including electronic and food. The EU is the largest foreign investor on the island, but for now, Poland only accounts for a fraction of this trade. With the new expansion plans, both Warsaw and Taipei aim to boost these numbers.
European Union and NATO allies must respond, said Lithuanian Prime Minister Ingrida Šimonytė. On Friday, heads of governments of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia convened to address growing security threats. This comes in the wake of the discovery of severed underwater telecommunications cables in a suspected sabotage operation. Piotr Miszczuk reports.
This is the Chinese cargo ship Yipeng 3, currently sitting idle in the Kattegat Strait in Danish waters. It is being monitored by Danish and Swedish authorities as it is suspected of breaking two cable links, one between Lithuania and Sweden and another connecting Germany and Finland.
If such an anchor falls down and collides with an undersea cable of the size we're speaking about now, which I saw today, with the diameter of 5 centimeters, that anchor would unbelievably easily destroy that cable. Totally.
The Russian-captained vessel under a Chinese flag set sail from the Russian port in Ust-Luga, and navigating westward, it purportedly broke both cables. The ship is now at the center of a sabotage investigation, as experts find it difficult to believe the destruction of cables was an accident. Meeting on Friday in Lithuania's capital Vilnius, the prime ministers of the Baltic states call for a strong reaction should their claims prove to be true.
Depending on the outcome, the European Union and NATO allies must respond appropriately to malign actions with restrictive measures.
We can proceed with next steps, how we can defend ourselves, and next sanctions and coordinated reactions, how we can deal with those issues and those ships which we don't know whom they belong.
One of the damaged lines was of crucial importance to Lithuania, as the severed cable provided up to a third of the country's internet. The other was vital to Finland.
Luckily, we have been preparing for different kind of problems like this before, and we have several cables in different places. So basically this incident didn't affect the Finnish society at all.
With the 2022 Nord Stream pipeline sabotage and last year's damage to the Baltic Connector gas pipeline linking Estonia to Finland and Sweden, it now seems the Baltic Sea has grown to become a battleground for hybrid warfare, as experts suspect a Russian hand in the incident.
If we just look at the maritime domain, cutting these cables, I think, is a reminder that they're trying to, let everybody know we're still here and we're being, bogged down in Ukraine, but we also have our eye on the Baltic states, because that's the only thing that they are capable of doing right now.
Yet, since the vessel sails under a Chinese flag, questions arise over China's intention in the Baltic Sea, especially given that another Chinese ship was also enmeshed in the 2023 rupture to the Baltic Connector pipeline.
There is thinking in China that they would like to strengthen economic ties with EU member states in light of a looming Trump administration, which is almost certainly going to levy heavy tariffs against them and engage in a trade war. This would not be a good way of going about it by doing this if it's linked back to China.
Both China and Russia have officially denied the allegations of their possible involvement in the sabotage.
Ukraine's Defense Minister Rustem Umerov was in Stockholm on Friday for talks with his Swedish counterpart, Jonson. Further Swedish aid packages for Ukraine are reportedly on their way to Kyiv. Now joining us live from Kyiv with more is our Ukrainian correspondent, Oz Chatterjee. Good evening, Oz. Now, has the trip been a productive trip for the Ukrainian Defense Minister, and what is he expected to bring home?
Well, the visit did prompt some talk about production of long-range drones. That's the Ukraine's domestic production of long-range drones that the Swedish have agreed to finance, among other things. I think some plane parts as well were included for the Griffin fighters that they're planning. So a bunch of aid packages mentioned in this press conference earlier today. Let's take a listen to what the Swedish Defense Minister Jonson had to say.
The planned Swedish support for Ukraine for 2025 and 2026 is about 25 billion Swedish krona for next year and the year after. And we stand ready to do more if needed. Let me also say that we can today also announce that we have a deepened cooperation. The Swedish government is ready to contribute with substantial funding for the mass production of long-range missiles and drones.
So that's about 2.2 billion US dollars of aid there. That's the number quoted. Now, also, Rustem Umerov spoke at the conference. He gave an update on the frontline situation, saying that the situation was difficult and that Russia is attempting to gain territories with huge losses in equipment and manpower. And he cited that as the reason they've sought to bring in North Korean reinforcements. So more work strengthening Ukraine's defense cooperation with its partners and also its domestic industry. So Kyiv will be happy with the results today, but much, much more work to be done.
Yes, certainly much more is needed there. Oz Chatterjee reporting from Kyiv. Thank you. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán on Friday said that he would invite Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit the country. He added that Budapest would not comply with the International Criminal Court's recently issued arrest warrant for the Israeli leader. Alex Sumlinsky has more.
State parties to the international.
The
International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant on Thursday for Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, alongside Hamas commander Mohammed Daif. While some countries have said they will comply with the court's arrest warrant, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has outright declared that he will defy the court.
So there is no other choice but to defy this decision. So today I will invite Israel's Prime Minister Mr. Netanyahu for a visit to Hungary, and in that invitation I will guarantee that if he comes, the ICC's ruling will have no effect in Hungary and we will not follow its contents.
Theoretically, the ICC warrant means Netanyahu and Gallant could be arrested if they travel to any of the more than 120 countries that are parties to the court. European countries like Austria, Slovenia and Lithuania have signaled that they would respect the court's decision and potentially arrest Netanyahu if he steps foot on their soil.
The court's decisions are binding for member states. Once the court issues an arrest warrant, its execution is binding in all state parties to the Rome Statute of the ICC, or those states or territories that accept the ICC's jurisdiction.
While not as stern in their words, multiple Czech politicians, including Defense Minister, Foreign Minister and the Prime Minister, have criticized the ICC ruling.
The unfortunate decision of the ICC undermines its authority in other cases when it equates the elected representatives of a democratic state with the leaders of an Islamist terrorist organization.
Others, like Estonia, have voiced more cautious reactions.
Upholding the international order based on international law and rules is important to us. At the same time, we are skeptical they'll contribute to a lasting peace in the Middle East.
The EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, said on Thursday that the arrest warrants issued by the ICC were binding and should be executed. The ICC's arrest warrants come as Israel's offensive in Gaza recently entered its second year, with the death toll in Gaza exceeding 44,000. The offensive was a response to Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, in which about 1,200 people were killed and more than 250 taken hostage. Israel denies the allegation that its forces are committing genocide in Gaza.
Romanians will be heading to the polls for the next 3 consecutive weekends to elect a new president and parliament. Judging by the candidates, Romania could stay on its generally pro-European path or shift towards a more nationalist approach. With the rise of far-right leadership in Europe, the question arises, is Romania next? Sonia Agata-Biszczan reports.
Over a dozen candidates are competing to become the next Romanian president. The leading candidates are Marcel Ciolacu, Romania's Prime Minister and leader of the center-left Social Democratic Party, and George Simion, the populist leader of the radical right alliance of the Unity of Romanians. Ciolacu favors EU and NATO relations, opposes extremism, and his presidential bid focuses on higher incomes and reindustrialization.
The plan for Romania, I exposed parts of it and presented it to Congress. We are talking about higher incomes and purchasing power for Romanians, the reindustrialization of Romania, completing the highways and the entire infrastructure, and in the field of education and health, we are talking about the dignity of Romanians in the diaspora.
However, allegations of luxury private jet travel have raised concerns over his integrity. Coming in second in the polls, the populist leader Simion has expressed support for Ukraine, but has also pledged to halt military assistance to it if he wins. He also says he will back the peace agreement announced by US President-elect Donald Trump, even if it requires Kyiv to make territorial concessions.
Hello, Mr. President. It's time for peace. You promised peace. The Romanian people want peace, so maybe you can consider to let the Ukrainians into NATO.
As Romania, one of Ukraine's neighbors, has been providing military aid to Ukraine, questions arise about the future of further support in the wake of the elections.
Romania overall is a pro-American, pro-Brussels country unless tempted by links with Russia. Nonetheless, Russia has been one of the topics as regards some of the candidates.
On Friday, news emerged that Romania could become a full member of Europe's Schengen travel zone by early 2025, to be confirmed on a December meeting of EU interior ministers. The leading presidential candidate Ciolaku welcomed this development as a significant step towards enhancing freedom of movement.
Former Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, his chief of staff and ex-minister of state assets could be facing charges for the failed 2020 postal election. That's the conclusion presented today in Parliament by the committee investigating the presidential election, which was supposed to be conducted solely through postal voting, but never materialized. Kazimierz Wysiak reports from Warsaw.
Emotions were running high here in the Polish Parliament on Friday as members of the parliamentary committee investigating the failed 2020 presidential election presented the report. The accusations were laid against some of the highest-ranking government officials from the previous administration, including former Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, Minister of State Assets Jacek Sasin, the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister, but also the leader of the Conservative Party, Jarosław Kaczyński. As you can imagine, members of the Conservative Party were not happy with that report.
I told you earlier, the committee was set up for a political witch hunt. It was a political circus. Everything is clear about this case.
But the truth lies in the pudding. Due to the pandemic, the voting was to be done solely through the Polish post for the first time in history. After spending more than 12 million euro for the ballots and urns, the election was called off at the last minute. No person was ever held responsible.
The number of irregularities is terrifying. The committee's report indicates clearly that in the near future, both former Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki and ex-Minister of State Assets Jacek Sasin could have their immunities waived.
According to Karolina Pawliczak, a member of the committee from Civic Coalition, there is one person who bears most of the blame.
The person most responsible, in my opinion, is the leader of the Law and Justice Party, Jarosław Kaczyński. It was he who made the decisions, and Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki was just his tool.
The parliamentary committee delivered all of the evidence to the state prosecutor and informed it of potential crimes being committed by the previous government. The prosecutor's office set up a special investigative team due to the gravity of the accusations and the sheer number of testimonies to go through.
It's not a matter of the next few weeks, but I think it shouldn't take more than a few months. Some evidence has already been reviewed, but the prosecutors still need to go through the materials which they weren't aware of until recently.
The failed 2020 presidential election is only one of few scandals that the Law and Justice Party is currently dealing with, as it is also accused of mishandling millions of euro from the so-called Justice Fund and using the Pegasus spyware to spy on members of the then opposition. According to the state prosecution, the investigations into these scandals will take at least a few months. From Warsaw, TVP World, Kazimierz Wysiak.
And now for some cultural news from the Polish capital. This evening, the Grand Theatre National Opera is holding a premiere by the famed Polish composer Krzysztof Penderecki. The piece, based on a 1928 play by German dramatist and literary Nobel Prize winner Gerhard Hauptmann, is called The Black Mask. Our reporter Karolina Stoltzman has more.
The Black Mask opera, set in the lower Silesian town of Bolkenhain, now Bolków, follows a group of people belonging to the bourgeoisie of society. Isolated at a remote location, the group is confronted with an unfamiliar threat: a man in a black mask.
This claustrophobia and isolation works psychologically on these people until they finally reveal their true natures, which are mostly pretty horrible.
Krzysztof Penderecki initially premiered The Black Mask in 1986 in Salzburg, Austria. Though originally the play is set in the 17th century, the Warsaw production's more contemporary setting is a nod to the modern applicability of the opera's satirical take on societal discontent with its leaders.
If you ask many people in the street what they think of their leaders, whether we're talking about the United Kingdom or Poland or wherever you go, you will encounter a lot of cynicism and despair, perhaps. about the quality of people who lead us. And I think that's what you're seeing in this piece.
The cast's leading lady has dubbed Penderecki's expressionist score as essential for highlighting the opera's themes.
His music is so well connected to the text, to the drama, that I think the audience will be definitely shocked.
Rubiš recalls the musical challenge her role in the opera posed.
This is one of the most difficult parts that I have ever studied and sung. Audience will be shocked, mesmerized. I think will leave the theater speechless.
Warsaw's Grand Theatre National Opera is lifting the curtain on the Black Mask for the first time on Friday.
Lin Chia-lung, the delegation chairman of Taiwan, paid a visit to Warsaw today to attend the Poland-Taiwan Economic Cooperation Forum. Big tech is the main driver of future bilateral economic ties. AI, 5G, microchips, and consumer electronics are just some of the areas that Taiwan might want to make greater investments in here in Poland. But could such close economic ties with Taipei cause a backlash on the Chinese mainland? And now joining us here on World News Tonight to discuss the possibilities is Maciej Szymczyk, Executive Director of the Central European Institute of Asian Studies. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Good evening.
Now, I'd like to start off by asking, does the fact that a Taiwanese delegation chairman, top Taiwanese official, came to Poland, that some type of diplomatic offensive has begun, perhaps tightening ties with Warsaw or the region? What do you think this signals?
Actually, I think this is a continuation of a trend that we've seen emerge since 2020, when Taiwan started to be way more active in the Central European region compared to the previous years. Of course, the drivers of those interactions were especially the Czech Republic and Lithuania, which really had the most kind of visible activity with regards to Taiwan. But other countries in the region were also rather active. Slovakia during the time was quite an active player, and to some extent also Poland, which made some inroads with Taiwan during that time, in both in economic cooperation but also in political cooperation. Now we see that, of course, this wave is continuing. In one way, there are some changes because the cooperation with Slovakia is maybe not as active anymore, but instead we see way more activity now coming out in Taiwan's relations with countries like Poland, for example. And as I said, this is really a continuation of something that started already in 2020 during the COVID pandemic, which was sort of the first impetus for this relationship. But now, as we see that more and more countries in the region are disillusioned with China due to its support to Russia, there are many more openings for Taiwan to cooperate with other countries in the region, and Poland is one of the countries that stands to potentially benefit from this type of cooperation.
Well, when we looked back to the somewhat recent example of Lithuania, Lithuania supports the Taiwanese cause. It even opened a trade office or de facto embassy. In return, Taiwan has promised investments in Lithuania. Has this been successful so far? Did it pay off? And did it overtake the cost-benefit analysis with making China upset?
Right. I mean, the case of Lithuania is really a complex one, and it's not maybe necessarily the best case on which to judge whether it's possible to have relations with Taiwan that are beneficial and what kind of coercion that country might face. In case of Lithuania, we've seen really very bold and very visible steps toward establishing the relationship with Taiwan. Some of those really happening outside of the traditional way how these relations are managed. So I would not say that Lithuania is the best example for making this type of comparison between cooperating with China and with Taiwan. Within Europe and even within the Central European region, we've seen many countries that have managed to sort of do the both things, right? And Slovakia here may be an example during the 2020-2023 period, because it was in many ways equally active with regards to building ties with Taiwan compared to Lithuania and Czech Republic without facing such backlash from China. So I wouldn't say that by cooperating with Taiwanese, Poland is necessarily inviting a big backlash from the Chinese side. For what we are seeing today, for example, this is something that has long been done in Europe, that this type of interactions with Taiwanese politicians, which are happening against the backdrop of economic cooperation, are not necessarily as sensitive in Chinese views. Of course, China would have much bigger offense if we've seen interaction, especially public interactions with Polish political representatives. That would be a very different case. But in this type of case where we see interaction with Taiwan on the framework of economic cooperation and within the work of a chamber of commerce, for example, which in essence is a private actor, that is not so sensitive.
So Poland will likely pursue the economic relations and benefits and stay away from the politics.
That is, of course, one of the scenarios that can happen. But of course, some level of political cooperation is actually already happening between Poland and Taiwan. Actually, Poland was the first European country that has concluded an extradition treaty with Taiwan back in 2019, which was a very big deal, actually, as it was. As this is a very, on one hand, very sensitive political topic related to sovereignty and the justice system, and on the other hand, it's also very valuable for the Taiwanese in terms of safeguarding Taiwanese citizens against potential extraditions to China, which are now prohibited by the European Court of Human Rights. In any case, I think there will be both levels of interactions happening, not just the economic one, also the political one, especially as we see that Taiwan is one of the players being active in support to Ukraine. It has been working with bordering countries of Ukraine, like Poland, like Romania, in delivering aid to Ukraine, either via the NGOs working in those countries, but also via intergovernmental ties. So I think both ways of interactions are really something that's on the table currently. But of course, Poland might be calculating on how to approach this from a maybe bit broader perspective, not just from the perspective of the direct link with Taiwan, but also embedding it into the overall approach it has to China, where currently Poland is facing some pressure over its votes regarding EU tariffs, which has nothing to do with Taiwan, of course, but this is something that may be a factor in how Poland will be thinking about cooperation with Taiwan down the line. In any case, when it comes to this type of economic cooperation, there are definitely ways how this can be strengthened, because for now, Poland has been actually one of the less active countries in Central Europe in terms of economic cooperation with Taiwan. So there is a big gap that can be filled in various sectors, and it's starting already. We have some investments in Poland already in the automotive sector, in food processing sector. Now there is an opportunity for Poland to to participate in some of the more high-tech industries together with Taiwan, especially as the Taiwanese TSMC has decided to locate its primary European factory in Dresden, which means that the supply chain for the Dresden factory will most likely have a bit of a decentralized nature and will include companies also in the bordering countries, with Poland being one of the potential candidates here.
Okay, well, we'll have to see where this blossoming economic relationship takes us. Mate Smalczyk, Executive Director at the Central European Institute of Asian Studies, thank you very much for joining us tonight on World News.
Thanks for having me.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.